Welcome to It's Not Robinson Crusoe, but the podcast where we treat the world's literature not just as art or entertainment, but as the essential guidebook for navigating life. We all have moments when we feel lost. We look to friends, family, or self-help books for advice. But what if the most constant, reliable counsel you could receive came from pages of a novel, a classic you know by heart? For our first episode, we must start where the idea began, with a man who embodied this concept completely. Gabriel Betteridge, the elderly house steward from Wilkie Collins' masterful Victorian mystery, The Moonstone. Betteridge, a man of simple pleasures and deep tradition, is constantly perplexed by the chaos that erupts around him, the baffling theft of a priceless diamond, the strange behaviour of high society guests, and the baffling modern world spinning too fast. How does he cope? He turns to one book, his constant companion, his friend, his prophet. He says this: "When my spirits are bad, Robinson Crusoe. When I want advice, Robinson Crusoe. In past times when my wife plagued me, in present times when I have had a drop too much, Robinson Crusoe. I have worn out 6 stout Robinson Crusoes with hard work in my service. On my lady's last birthday she gave me a 7th. I took a drop too much of the strength of it, and Robinson Crusoe put me right again." For Betteridge, this book isn't just a story. It is his entire worldview, his moral compass, his therapeutic tool, and his personal holy writ. And this absolute faith in literature, is the foundation of this podcast. The name of our show, It's Not Robinson Crusoe, but is a nod to Betteridge. We acknowledge that his absolute devotion to a single 18th century novel is extreme and perhaps a little humorous. But the impulse is deeply human. We're searching for our own modern, personalised Crusoe. So let's explore 3 ways Betteridge uses his novel and what these methods teach us about finding guidance in our own reading. The first way Betteridge utilises Robinson Crusoe is as a psychological anchor. Betteridge is a man who values order. He keeps the stately home of the Herncastle family running like clockwork. When the Moonstone is stolen and eccentric detectives and strange pious relatives arrive, his predictable world fractures. The beauty of returning to a book you know intimately, like Crusoe, is its predictability. The ending never changes. The lessons are constant. When Betteridge is overwhelmed by the complexity of Sergeant Cuff's police work or Miss Clack's endless moralising, he retreats into the known world of Crusoe's island. Crusoe's methodical inventory, the painstaking cataloguing of every salvaged object, the construction of the calendar, and the building of his enclosure, is an exercise in bringing order to absolute chaos. Betteridge, in reading it, is subconsciously reinforcing his own sense of duty and organisation. The lesson here is that when life feels too chaotic, an old, trusted book can act as a safe, stable narrative. It's a reliable friend that reminds you that resilience and structure can be carved out of any adversity. The second use is where Wilkie Collins gets delightfully mischievous. Betteridge uses Crusoe as an oracle. He practices a kind of literary divination known as bibliomancy. Faced with a dilemma, say whether to trust a certain person or whether it's time to take action, Betteridge doesn't simply read the book, he performs a ritual. He opens the volume at random, lets his finger fall on a passage, and believes that line will contain the prophetic advice he needs. Now, this is often played for laughs. For example, when he consults the book on an issue of writing his narrative, the passage he lands on is utterly irrelevant, leaving him more confused than before. But despite the comic element, this highlights a serious need. When we are stuck, we crave an external, objective voice to break through our own overthinking. And the act of consulting the oracle forces Betteridge to step outside of his immediate worry and consider the advice, however bizarre it may be. The process of searching for guidance is, in itself, therapeutic. The lesson here is that sometimes the value of the guidebook isn't the specific advice it gives, but the permission it grants for you to act, or the external perspective it forces you to adopt. Finally, Betteridge uses Crusoe as a template for the essential human condition, survival and perseverance. Betteridge sees Crusoe's struggle and the isolation, the resourcefulness, the eventual spiritual awakening as a universal manual on how to live. To Betteridge, a man lost on a desert island is merely an extreme version of a man trying to do his duty in a disorderly world. Both men learn to make do with little. Both struggle with feelings of isolation, and both use meticulous record keeping to feel in control. Crusoe's journey is one of ethical and practical self-reinvention, and Betteridge applies this guide to his life as an aging servant. He's trying to survive the great Victorian chaos with his dignity, piety, and routine intact. The lesson here is that literature provides the universal mirror. It shows us fundamental human struggles, like making sense of isolation or overcoming loss, and gives us a framework for enduring them, whether we're on a forgotten island or in an English country estate. So why Robinson Crusoe specifically? Why not Shakespeare or the Bible, which Betteridge also reads? Defoe's novel is famously obsessed with lists and details. Crusoe keeps an inventory of everything he saves from the wreck. This meticulous accounting is exactly what a good steward like Betteridge does. The book validates his own need for order and accountability. Crusoe is also the quintessential story of the self-made man, albeit a very spiritual one. Every shelter, every tool, every piece of clothing is the result of Crusoe's own labour. In a rapidly changing Victorian society, this story offered a powerful, stabilising myth that your worth is tied to your ability to work and endure, rather than just your birth or your class. And here's a subtle irony. Betteridge is surrounded by people, but constantly retreats into a book about a man who is utterly alone. Crusoe, meanwhile, desperately craves human company. Both men are using the story to solve the opposite of their actual problem. It proves that the guidebook works by offering a powerful escape narrative that, paradoxically, helps them cope with their reality. Gabriel Betteridge had his guide. But let's face it, as modern listeners, we need guidebooks for problems Defoe couldn't possibly imagine. Navigating career burnout, the complexities of digital identity, or the crushing pressures of relentless self-improvement. Robinson Crusoe doesn't have an entry for dealing with a bad boss or an entry for overcoming social media anxiety. That's where our podcast begins. The goal of It's Not Robinson Crusoe But is to find those guidebooks for modern life. Which books are teaching us resilience? Which are helping us understand identity? Which novels are the best manuals for navigating grief or ambition? Next week, we leave the cosy Victorian library and tackle a modern existential dilemma. We'll be asking, what can literature teach us about fear and uncertainty? Our guide will be The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. We'll be exploring what Douglas Adams teaches us about maintaining perspective and composure when the entire world seems utterly chaotic. After all, when faced with interstellar doom, the best advice might just be, don't panic. Oh, before you go, I want to hear from you. What book, novel, poem, play, or essay do you turn to when your spirits are bad? What books do you treat like your own personal reliable guidebook? Let us know on social media or in a comment section. Thank you for joining me for the first episode of It's Not Robinson Crusoe But. You can find links to the Moonstone and Robinson Crusoe in our show notes. So join us next time for Don't Panic, what the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy can teach us about chaos.